This chilling experience happened to me when I was just 11 years old. My best friend in the neighborhood discovered a dusty old Ouija board hidden among his older brother's belongings while his brother was away at college. Excitedly, he told me what it was and asked if I wanted to try it with him. Determined to prove my bravery, I quickly agreed. We ventured into his room, hearts pounding with a mix of fear and excitement, and began to experiment with the mysterious board. However, after several minutes of nothing happening, we were left feeling both foolish and disappointed. A few days later, my friend called me, his voice tinged with newfound excitement. He had done some research and learned how to use the board properly. Eager to give it another try, he invited me over. Feeling more confident that it was all just a harmless game, I agreed. We gathered an assortment of scented candles, placing them strategically around the board to create an eerie, flickering glow. With a sense of ceremony, we began the séance. When we asked the board if anyone was there, the planchette moved to yes. Skeptical, we both suspected the other of playing a trick. Nevertheless, we agreed to take it seriously. We asked the entity its name, and it slowly spelled out, Jack. My friend, curious and slightly unnerved, asked if it was a person. The planchette slid to no. We then asked what it was, and it chillingly spelled out, demon. I, trying to mask my growing fear with bravado, dared it to prove its presence. Suddenly, a deafening bang erupted from the garage, sending a jolt of terror through us. Keep in mind, we were alone in the house. Panic-stricken, we bolted out of the room and dashed to the garage, only to find it empty. Our fear was palpable as we realized something beyond our understanding was at play. Weeks went by and my friend began to share increasingly disturbing accounts of his experiences. He felt an ominous presence watching him whenever he was downstairs in the kitchen or living room. At night, he felt the weight of someone sitting at the end of his bed, and every time he passed the garage, he felt a cold, invisible hand grab his wrist, pulling him towards the door. His escalating fear led him to invite me over again when his parents weren't home, seeking the comfort of companionship. The moment I stepped into his house, an eerie feeling washed over me, as if unseen eyes were tracking my every move. We tried to distract ourselves with video games in his room, but the uneasy atmosphere was inescapable. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed from downstairs, but they were unlike any human footsteps. They sounded like hooves, like a full-grown horse was pacing below us. This was followed by a grotesque noise, a mix of sinister laughter and wet coughing. My friend, now terrified, ran to the door and slammed it shut. We frantically hid, he under the bed and I in the closet. Then we heard it, a slow, deliberate scratching at the door, like a single enormous claw dragging across the wood. My friend broke down in tears, and I was on the verge of joining him. Desperately, he yelled, "Leave us alone, Jack! You're scaring us!" Miraculously, the noises stopped, and we heard the entity run down the stairs. Desperate to end the torment, my friend grabbed the Ouija board from the closet and dashed downstairs. He tore off the screen door of the gas fireplace, shoved the board inside, and prepared to ignite it. Just as he was about to turn on the gas, a guttural moan emanated from the basement, directly behind him. In a frantic move, he flicked on the fireplace, and we watched as the board was consumed by flames. That night, we refused to go back inside until his parents returned. When they did, they were furious about the destruction of his brother's Ouija board, grounding my friend and discarding the charred remains. But from that day on, the paranormal disturbances ceased. To this day, the memory of that night stays with me, a stark reminder of the terrifying power such games can unleash. I vowed never to touch a Ouija board again, and I have kept that promise. My family and I were settling into our new house. I was about 12 at the time, navigating the excitement and unease that comes with a fresh start. One night, as I lay in my bed trying to fall asleep, I couldn't help but fixate on the old rocking chair left by the previous family. It sat ominously in the corner of my room, an eerie reminder of the house's past. It was a school night, and I knew I needed rest, but sleep eluded me. I stared at the rocking chair for what felt like an eternity, hoping that my restless mind would eventually succumb to slumber. 10 minutes passed, and my eyes, heavy with fatigue, fluttered shut. When I reopened them, my heart froze. There, in the dim light, was the silhouette of a woman seated in the rocking chair, her gaze piercing through the darkness, locked onto me. She remained utterly still, her silence more chilling than any scream. My door had been shut tight, and it creaked loudly, so I knew it wasn't my mother. Terror gripped me. My mind raced with a single desperate plan: close my eyes and feign sleep. I squeezed them shut, praying fervently that when I opened them again, the figure would be gone. After a minute, which felt like an eternity, I dared to open my eyes. To my horror, the figure had moved. She was now kneeling directly in front of me, her face inches from mine. Her entire form was pitch black, devoid of features, including eyes. I hadn't heard her move from the chair, no footsteps, no rustling, just a suffocating, unnatural silence. Panic surged through me, and I screamed for my mother with all the force I could muster. My cries were loud enough to wake the entire neighborhood. The door burst open, and my mother flicked on the lights, flooding the room with a reassuring glow. But the woman was gone, vanished as if she had never been there. I lay awake the rest of the night, too terrified to close my eyes again. The next morning, exhausted, I dragged myself to school, haunted by the memory of that night. For a year, I was plagued by nightmares, the shadowy figure haunting my dreams. Even now, after so many years, the memory lingers, a shadow in the back of my mind, reminding me of that inexplicable, terrifying encounter. I've experienced a few unsettling paranormal events in my life, but two stand out as the most chilling. Until I was 18, I was utterly convinced that my house was haunted based on the eerie phenomena I witnessed. It started as a regular day. I had just finished doing laundry and was hanging up my clothes in my closet. Minding my own business, I suddenly heard someone whisper my name directly in my ear, clear as day. The voice was unfamiliar, and I was home alone. No one else was there. My heart raced, and I sprinted out of the room faster than I ever had before. Later that day, I told my brother about the incident, but he just brushed it off, saying, "Yeah, right," and accused me of lying. The next day, one of my good friends came over. We were hanging out in my room, and I recounted the unnerving experience to him. Intrigued, he suggested we use a tape recorder to ask questions to the ghost, just like they do on those ghost hunter shows. We started with simple questions like, "What's your name?" and "How old are you?" After playing the tape back, we only heard our own voices. Disappointed, we were about to call it quits when my friend decided to give it one last try. He picked up the tape recorder and asked, "Where are you?" Fully expecting to hear nothing but my friend's voice, I played the tape back. My heart dropped. We both heard a raspy, decrepit voice say, "I'm in the closet." The shock was immediate and visceral. I dropped the tape recorder, and we both bolted out of the room. My friend never came over to my house again, and luckily we moved shortly after, due to my father's job. Those two paranormal encounters have left an indelible mark on me. I will never forget the terror I felt in those moments. I was returning home from college to spend winter break with my parents. They had recently moved out of my childhood home and bought a new house, a place steeped in history, supposedly built in the late 1800s on the coast of southern Maine. January in Maine is bitterly cold, and in a house that old, it felt even colder. My little brother, who was about 13 at the time, and I had to share a bed due to the limited number of rooms. Plus, I won't lie, the old house really creeped me out a bit. The bedroom we were in was a downstairs front room of the house. It was late, and I was exhausted from the long drive from college, so I fell asleep quickly. Then, around 8 a.m., I was abruptly woken up by the sound of intensely labored breathing coming from my little brother. At first, I thought he must have come down with a terrible cold and was really congested. I lay there for a couple of minutes, finally deciding to roll over and check on him because he sounded awful, like he was having an asthma attack or a death rattle. When I rolled over, I immediately saw he was on his side facing me, wide-eyed. He whispered, "That's not you?" The noise continued, loud and unmistakable, and it was coming from the bed, directly between us. We jumped out of bed, checked under it, and scoured the entire room. All the while, the breathing continued, relentless and unnerving. Finally, at a loss, we stood on either side of the bed, facing each other and listening in disbelief. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. That first night's experience deeply unsettled me and cast a shadow over my entire stay at my parents' house. Every night, I found myself thinking about it, haunted by the inexplicable noise. To this day, I have no explanation for who or what was making that eerie, labored breathing. I used to be a real estate agent in a very rural area, but now I'm retired. This experience is undoubtedly the most terrifying event that has ever happened to me. During my career, I often visited old, foreclosed farmhouses to capture good interior shots to post online. One day I arrived at a house that was in pretty bad shape. It had been left empty all winter and was quite old. Nonetheless, I started taking pictures. Now let me tell you, I don't scare easily. I actually loved exploring old houses alone. It was a thrill for me, and I was always excited to uncover hidden gems in these neglected properties. So I wasn't jumpy or expecting anything out of the ordinary. I'd done this countless times before. As I began taking pictures of the rooms, everything was going smoothly until I reached a room halfway down the hall. My camera flashed, but no picture appeared. Confused, I tried several more times, illuminating the room with flash, but still, no image showed up. Frustrated, I assumed the camera was broken and continued down the hallway, eager to explore the rest of the house. I reached another room at the back of the house. Not thinking about my supposedly broken camera, I instinctively pulled it out and took a picture. To my surprise, it worked. I was thrilled, thinking I could finally go back to the previous room and capture the image that had eluded me. Returning to the problematic room, I aimed my camera and pressed the button. The flash went off, but again, no picture appeared. That's when things took a bizarre turn. Out of nowhere, I heard a whispering sound right behind me, like someone was murmuring urgently and agitatedly over my shoulder. The words were unintelligible, but the tone sent chills down my spine. I spun around, but no one was there. That's when an icy pit formed in my stomach, and I realized I needed to leave immediately. Panicked, I ran outside and searched the perimeter of the house, thinking perhaps someone was outside talking, and the acoustics made them sound closer. But there was no one around. The house was surrounded by at least a square mile of open field, and not a soul was in sight. I jumped into my car and sped away, my heart pounding. I have never returned to that house or that area, and I never will. The memory of that whisper and the eerie malfunctioning of my camera still haunts me to this day.